I have been wanting to get back into racing games for a very long time now. Through the pandemic, I've even found myself having more time to try and put towards racing games. Looking back as far as like Need for Speed Underground 2, which was probably my main racing game I can think of over all time, I didn't want to get back into it in quite the same way. Using the controller, it just wasn't the same feel as using like a full-on racing wheel and pedals and shifter and just having the whole setup. This time around, I just wanted to feel fully immersed, and I wanted to get myself into some sort of racing simulator setup. And not only that, but I also wanted to stream it and have it mobile and usable for me. But one of the biggest things that held me back from wanting to get into a racing simulator was probably the prices. Just for Logitech's newest wheel and pedal setup is about $400. And that's not even including things like the shifter or if you want to get it on a mount, which is even more expensive. So what I decided to do is to keep my eyes open on secondhand marketplaces like OfferUp or even Facebook Marketplace, which can also be very good. So after many, many months of trying to find the right deal, I found one in particular on OfferUp. Now I'll show you what I saw on my phone now on the screen, and this is exactly what I saw, and this was the only picture that they had shown. Now based off the picture, you can see it pretty much shows everything that actually did end up coming with it, which I was very happy about. But in the picture from first glance, I could see the wheel. I'm assuming the pedals are there because the pedals come with the wheel. So if they're saying that it is the Logitech G923, then it's got to have the pedals as well. And in the background, I could see that it also came with the shifter, hopefully. And then it also had some kind of frame, which I had to do a lot of research to figure out which frame it was. Anyways, just for peace of mind purposes, I wanted to see how much the frame was pretty much. After a little bit of research, I was able to figure out which racing simulator seat that this was. And I found that it was the Playseat Evolution seat, if I was right, which retails for about $350. And not only that, but the wheel and pedals alone are about $400 themselves. So if it does come with the shifter, which is roughly about $60, we're looking at about an $810 without tax value. And he's only asking for $250. So I had to go with it. So I ended up meeting up with him, and everything to my surprise was there, except for the frame itself was a little rough. It was missing things like the seat and a bunch of nuts and screws, but for the deal that he was giving me, I didn't worry too much about it. I was honestly not even thinking of really using them in the first place. I was just going to use them normally, just how anybody else would, and I was just going to use them on my desk. But after a long time of just trying it out on my desk, I found many, many flaws in doing it this way, and overall it just wasn't very practical. So not only does it take a lot of time to get it set up on your desk, but also once it finally is set up on your desk, which can take from 5 to 10 minutes, I'd say, it's mounted to your desk, so it makes everything very shaky and wobbly if your desk isn't like bracketed to the wall, which majority of the people's aren't, including mine. And if you have your monitors on monitor stand, it makes everything just shake. And so your monitors are continuously just bouncing up and down. Everything on your desk is shaking. If you have any kind of drink or anything, everything's just going to shake. Not only that, but it's not very immersive, meaning if you're on just like your regular gaming chair, it's not stationary like it would be in a car. And the overall experience just, it isn't there. The wheel and everything feels great, but when it's doing things like it has its own built-in motor, and when it's trying to correct itself, like it just freaks out on your desk, especially when you crash. Not only that, but trying to use the pedals on like rough carpet, the traction it has isn't very good either, and you find it just kind of flopping around, and the overall experience is just it's not as good as it could be if it was on the regular racing simulator setup. But after much thinking, with the frame that I was planning on not even using in the first place, I decided it would be probably a lot cheaper if I were to just try and reuse it, other than trying to find just another seat and whole racing simulator setup, which this seat in the first place without the seat, which it's already missing, was $350 alone. And luckily for me, I had another gaming chair that I could repurpose into using with this frame. And so that's what I decided to do. So you guys already got a sneak peek at the wheel, the pedals, and the shifter, which are all in really good shape. I would say like new condition. Now for the rest of the system, I would say it was not kept as good as you would hope. As you can see, the whole mounting system for this is kind of in shambles. It's missing a good part of everything that is supposed to be here, including the seat. I mean, majority of it is here. it's usable. But as you can see, we're gonna have to make this work somehow. We don't have a chair for it, so we had to come up with a seat, which luckily I had an old gaming seat, which has seen better days. As you can see, my cats had a very fun time with it being leather. And you know, this was never the most comfortable seat, so I'm not too worried about it. But one thing that's cool is I can just simply put a seat cover over the whole thing. And once I get it mounted up, it should be relatively nice. I mean, it's got pretty decent bolstering, as you can see, basically like a racing seat as it is. And since I already have it, why spend more money on something that I already have? In order to get that to mount up to this beautiful frame, we did have to make some things work. I actually had to ask one of my buddies how I'd make this happen. And he basically said that if I use 3/4 inch plywood, it should be relatively easy. I just need to figure out the holes from the frame, of course, and figure out how I could get the holes from the seat to work on the frame, which is easy enough. You just take the bottom wheel parts with the casters, and you just take the square holes here and measure it up against the plywood here where it mounts up to the frame, and it should be relatively easy. We've already started kind of getting some rough estimates on where we want the holes, and then my friend was kind enough to bring me a bunch of random bolts that we're gonna see what we can make work here. One of the bad things about this frame too is it didn't, well, for one, it didn't have everything complete. I would say the only thing really missing was the seat, but it was missing a lot of simple just bolts and other random things. So like down here, underneath the foot pedals, it had these nice little stoppers here to keep the whole thing from just kind of shaking back and forth. So since I only had one, that didn't really help too much. It was still rocking. So we're gonna have to find some kind of one of these bolts probably that we're gonna try and get up through the wood and just mount it like so, if you can see that. And then once that comes up here, we can just put a bolt down or put a nut down and just keep it pretty held down there. And that should be good for that. So we are missing a couple of these as well. These ones go right into these spots and hold the whole seat from sliding back and forth, so you can adjust it based on how tall you are, which shouldn't be too big of an issue. I think one way we're gonna solve this is just by putting a couple screws in each side of this here to keep it from rocking back and forth. So it'd be pretty much mounted. Now, I did want this to be still usable for anybody, not just myself. Of course, we can just get it all screwed down and comfortable for me, but that's kind of besides the point here. I want anybody that comes over to be able to use this thing and have fun with it. So I want it to be still semi-adjustable. I know we're gonna screw some things down, but I think as long as the pedals can slide back and forth, which it's pretty free now, I think we're gonna be safe to mount down the seat portion. So if I put 4 screws in here, that should be good. As long as the feet can move back and forth, I think that's enough adjustment for anybody to use this. As for the wheel, we do have this mounting mechanism that also slides back and forth. So with this attachment out, it'll probably just slam, watch. Oh, maybe not. So with this attachment out, at least the wheel can slide back and forth like so that anyone can bring the wheel back and forth. So they'll be able to slide the pedals back and forth unless I screw them down, which it's starting to look like we might have to, unless I can find some more stoppers like this. If I can find another stopper to go in there to hold it from tilting, then that'll be okay. I really wanted this to be adjustable so that anyone could use it. Now, I'm still debating if I want to keep this long length at the end here. I think we're gonna end up just ripping that off. And then I believe we're gonna try and set something up on the back here because we wanna be able to move this thing around. We don't want it to just be stationary all the time. So I think to combat that, we're gonna have to put a section of our plywood on the back here. This isn't the final form because this is a little too short, so we're gonna have to cut another piece. But we're gonna put a piece of plywood here, and I think we're gonna try and put some casters on the back here, and then maybe have some sort of handle on the other far end there so that we can lift it up and kind of wheel it around. Now, with the whole frame being bolted to the plywood, that should be enough to make it structurally rigid and not fall apart and snap on us. The next step now is gonna be, we don't want it to just be bare plywood, so we're gonna have to sand it down and then get some nice stain on there, which we already have selected. So we decided to go with Behr's Gloss Stain and Poly. It's a water-based stain, and this should be pretty good for the job. Hopefully it's as black as I want it, but I guess we'll see. And then I also got a couple little latches that I don't know how many of these things I'm gonna use, but the idea here is We're gonna screw in a couple latches at the end and then maybe use something like this to just clip onto them, and that could be like a little handle for us so that when we want, we can take this and then lift it up and then just wheel it around wherever we wanna go. So at least that's the idea. I think the next thing to get started on now is just to get it all sanded. We don't want to get any splinters from this thing. We want it to be usable. We're going to be stepping on it and handling it. Not too bad, huh?
Nothing to brag about.
So we got pretty much everything sanded down so far, and it's looking pretty good. I ran out of battery, but we're gonna go around all the edges and just make sure all those are pretty much squared away too. And I think we're good to stain. I tried to round out each corner as best as I could, but I think that'll have to do for now. And over here, I think since we're recharging the sander right now and we need to finish up some sanding stuff, I think we can go ahead and get our mounting holes for our frame all squared away. Pretty much already got the holes into the chair, but since the chair holes line up a little bit differently, as you can see, they're a little bit wider for the frame, we're gonna have to go ahead and get those screwed in to the little piece of plywood we have for under the chair. And then we'll be pretty much good to go. And then we just got to get the chair all mounted up to the rest of the plywood and get that cut down to exactly the size that we're going to want. And we should be pretty much good for stain. We just got done staining. Everything turned out pretty good. We only did one side of it today. We'll have to let this cure overnight and then we'll have to hit the other sides tomorrow. But man, this stain is pretty hard to use. As you can see on our platform here, luckily this won't matter too much, but it is a little bit lighter of a finish than I would have preferred it. I would have liked them to be a little bit closer, but you won't even be seeing this too much, just the edges. So I'm not too worried about that. The main platform though, I'd say it turned out pretty good. Hopefully it looks even better after it fully dries out. Might have to give it one more wipe down, but I'm pretty happy with the black stain so far. We'll see how it turns out once I get the other side finished as well, but I'd say for day one, that's pretty good. Before I end this video, I just want to give a huge thanks to my friend Alex. Without his help and guidance, I wouldn't have even known where to begin on this. So thank you, and stay tuned for part 2.